I know I'm a little bit late to the party on this one, shall we say. But I've been taking my time with the story. I've been trying to actually actively partake in it because I've heard very good things with the Penacony story, so I've been actively trying to actually enjoy it. But what that has meant is that I'm slightly far behind on some of the actual content. One of which was Hanu's prison break, which I only just barely had finished yesterday, almost 2 weeks after the update has actually come out. But anyway, we have another character selector. Hoyoverse are just throwing these out right now, which is great because it means people can pick up characters they otherwise wouldn't have. For this one, we only have 4 options. So the question is, between Guinaifen, Sampo, Asta, and Yukong, who do we actually want to pick? And hopefully, if you have been undecided on who you're picking, hopefully this helps in some way. So let's just start from left to right and we'll go from there. So this is Guinaifen. Guinaifen, being a Nihility character of the fire element, she essentially is just a fire element dot character. There's not much to be said. Her kit pretty much exclusively revolves around you applying burn and then making sure that people that are burned take more damage because they're on fire. So her basic attack is just a simple deal damage. It's the standard basic attack that everyone pretty much has. Her skill deals fire damage equal to 60% of her attack to a single enemy and then 20% to any adjacent enemies with a 100% base chance to burn the target and adjacent targets. When burned, enemies will take a fire dot equal to 83% of Guinaifen's attack at the beginning of each turn, lasting for 2 turns. So she's a pretty consistent burn unit, can be garnered from this. When her talent is when Guinaifen is on the field, there is a 100% base chance to apply Fire Kiss to an enemy after their burn status causes damage. When inflicted with Fire Kiss, the enemy receives 4.0% increased damage, which lasts for 3 turns and can stab up to 3 times. So at level 1, that can go up to 12% increased damage just because they're on fire. Her ult deals fire damage equal to 72% of Guinaifen's attack to all enemies. If the target enemy is currently inflicted with burn, then their burn status immediately produces damage equal to 72% of their original damage. So as should be fairly obvious, her kit revolves completely around setting people on fire and then making sure the people that are on fire take even more damage. Then her technique immediately attacks the enemy after entering the battle, deals damage for 4 times, dealing fire damage equal to 50% of Guinaifen's attack to a random single enemy target each time with a 100% base chance of inflicting Fire Kiss on them. So that's Guinaifen's kit. She is a pretty consistent fire dot unit, and she is a character that has eluded me for a very long time, and I've only just recently got, and I personally have not put much time in her, unfortunately. As far as a dot character goes, she's fairly solid. Benefit of being able to just constantly, make fire worse for your enemies is very, very nice to have. And in the future, if there's ever a fire dot character that really relishes characters being on fire, she could be very, very beneficial. But that is very pie in the sky thinking, shall we say. So have a cheeky look at her Eidolons. When skill is used, there is a 100% base chance to reduce the attacked target enemy's effect resistance by 10% for 2 turns. It's nice. When an enemy target is being burned, the damage multiplier of the burn status applied by her basic or skill increases by 40%. That is nice. That is pretty good. Every time the burn status inflicted by Guinaifen causes damage, Guinaifen regenerates 2 energy. Energy regen, always a lovely addition. And then this increases stackable Fire Kiss count by 1. So essentially her E6 could be really good just because of that extra 4% or whatever the increase was. Not to mention that's only at level 1. Not half bad Eidolons. E1 is nice to have. I don't think it's the best. E2 seems pretty solid. E4, pretty nice to have. And then E6 is obviously the best one by far. So if your Guinaifen is pretty close to E5, is pretty close to E6, this might be worth getting. Guinaifen, very solid Pyro Dot unit. If you've recently just acquired Black Swan, might be worth picking up Guinaifen if you managed to not pick up her prior. But yeah, definitely a solid Pyro Dot option. Sampo. Now Sampo is a character that I have spent a lot of time in the early days of the game, and now in the later game, I'm putting a bit more time into, because he pairs exceptionally well with Black Swan. So much so that he, along with Black Swan, have actively made me stop playing AI when I get the chance and just play the game as it is, because it is very fun. Sampo's kit is very satisfying. So his basic attack, standard, deal damage. It's nothing special. His E, very solid. In theory, anyway. It will deal wind damage equal to 28% of Sampo's attack to a single enemy, and then bounce to 4, and then bounce to 4 other enemies. And then it will bounce 4 other times, potentially hitting the same enemy 5 times in total, or bouncing to other enemies, and there's a chance of inflicting wind shear as a result. What this means is, in AoE, pretty solid. In single target though, insane potential for bringing down their break percentage. It is so solid on single targets. I love Sampo just for how satisfying it is to do a skill on a single target character and apply all of those wonderful dots, wait for the enemy turn to happen, and then just watch all those beautiful numbers just come in. His talent is Sampo's attacks have a 65 base chance to inflict wind shear for 3 turns. Enemies inflicted with wind shear will take wind dot equal to 20% of Sampo's attack at the beginning of each turn. Wind shear can stack up to 5 times. So yeah, he's a dot character. This is his bread and butter. Everything he does can cause wind shear. You want as much wind shear as on a person as possible. His technique inflicts blind. Blinded enemies cannot detect your team. When initiating combat against a blinded enemy, there is a 100% fixed chance to delay all enemy actions by 25%. So, it's a pretty nice technique. It's always nice to have a little bit of delay on your enemies. And then his ultimate is phenomenal for dot teams for obvious reasons, as we will soon see. But deals wind damage equal to 96% of Sampo's attack to all enemies with a 100% base chance to increase the target's dot taken by 20% for 2 turns. Again, this is all at level 1, so this can scale, all the way up to level 10, not to mention Eidolons. So Sampo's potential to deal a bunch of dot onto someone when combined with someone like Black Swan is phenomenal, because obviously Black Swan has a ton of Arcana. She can stack up to about 50, and then you can have Sampo just come out of the gate with, oh, here you go, those Arcana stacks of which you have 50 on an enemy now. Don't know how you've done it, but you've managed it. Yeah, I'm going to increase that damage to 20 extra percent, and that's only at level 1. Sampo is so much fun, and he is a great character to have if you have any kind of dot team that you find fun. If you don't find dot teams very fun, Sampo is not the character for you. Although you can do a weird break effect thing with him, because his skill is very good at the whole breaking mechanic, but it's not what he's intended for. But his skill is very satisfying to pull off. I love Sampo's kit. I did at the beginning of the game, and I still do now, even though he's not considered particularly amazing. But with someone like Black Swan on the team, he just excels so much more than he ever used to. His E1, when using skill, deals damage for 1 extra time to a random enemy, so this will now bounce 6 times, which is just delightful. Defeating an enemy with wind shear has a 100% base chance to inflict all enemies with wind stacks of wind shear equivalent to the talent's wind shear. Being able to just keep dot on people is absolutely wonderful. I really like his E2. Both of these, pretty solid Eidolons. His E4, I think, is what a lot of people consider one of his best. When skill hits an enemy with 5 or more stacks of wind shear, the enemy immediately takes 8% of current wind shear damage. So essentially, with E4, he becomes kind of a mini Kafka. So you can have a single target enemy. Let's say they've got 4 stacks of wind shear already on them. It's now Sampo's turn. You got a skill point, you use it. You pop it, wind shear goes up to 5. You still got 4 more stacks of this. And then all those stacks, yeah, they don't add on, but you've now done 24% of current wind shear damage onto the enemy. It's very nice. Again, combine that with someone like Black Swan, and you're just having a great time. And then, of course, E6, very big. Talent's wind shear damage multiplier increases by 15%. Anything that means wind shear does more damage, very good to have on the team. Those are Sampo's Eidolons. Honestly, they're all pretty good. Any Eidolon you can get for Sampo is just going to improve his character pretty consistently. A big one, obviously, E1, pretty solid improvement. E4, very solid improvement. E6, also really massive improvement. Really like his Eidolons, I must say. To say I really like Sampo's kit would be an understatement. Asta, the character we all should have by now. Standard basic attack. Her skill, I really like her skill. Deals fire damage equal to 25% of Asta's attack to a single enemy. Further deals damage for 4 extra times, with each time dealing fire damage equal to 25% of Asta's attack to a random enemy. So it is quite similar to Sampo's in some sense. It's very satisfying to pull off, even though the damage numbers aren't usually there, but it is a very satisfying skill to pull off. Her talent is gains 1 stack of charging for every different enemy hit by Asta, plus an extra stack if the enemy hit has fire weakness. For every stack of charging Asta has, all allies attack increased by 7%, up to 5 times. Starting from her second turn, Asta's charging count is reduced by 3 at the beginning of every turn. So really solid buffer in a sense, because you can just, you know, constantly buff your allies, and in the early game, very good option to have. Her technique immediately attacks the enemy after entering the battle, deals fire damage equal to 50% of Asta's attack to all enemies. You know, it's whatever, it's not the best technique in the game, but you know, if you need to start the battle with fire, here she is. Then her ultimate, very simple, yet very effective. Increases speed of all allies by 36 for 2 turns. So she essentially just makes your team very quick. She is a very solid 4-star option as a support. She's a very solid harmony character. If you need someone that just speeds your team, Asta, great option. People still use her. She's still a very solid 4-star. Of course, there are better 5-star variants out there. There are always going to be faster and better 5-star variants out there. And at some point, Asta may be replaced by another 4-star. Who knows? But for now, she's a very solid character. And having a character that very simply just goes, here you go, be quick, is very beneficial for a number of teams. Speed in this game is always going to be one of the most important stats, and having a character that blankly just goes, here you go, have like 36 at level 1, very solid to have. So starting with E1, we have when using skill, deals damage for 1 extra time to a random enemy. It's quite nice. You know, it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of extra damage. If you built her for like a weird hybrid damage build, this could be more beneficial. After using her ultimate, Asta's charging stacks will not be reduced in the next turn. Very useful Eidolon to have, I must say. Definitely would not mind having. Asta's energy regen rate increases by 15% when she has 2 or more charging stacks. Again, just feeds into her need to use her ult as much as possible. This is really nice to have, actually, looking at this. And then charging stacks lost in each turn is reduced by 1. So honestly, all of our Eidolons seem really solid. The first one is, you know, it's a bit of whatever, but the other 3 really benefit one another quite well. So yeah, that's Asta. Obviously, of course, everyone should have a copy of Asta. I'm pretty sure she's free. But yeah, Asta's a very solid character. If you need a half decent support for the early game and even mid to late game at this point, she's still really solid. Yeah, there are other characters that can probably provide more benefits to the team overall, but for a 4-star variant, she is very solid, especially with those Eidolons. Those Eidolons are quite nice. Last but not least, we have a character that I kind of have a soft spot for, and yet everyone else seems to hate, and that is very unfortunate. We have Yukong. Yukong has had a hard life. No one seems to use her, no one seems to like her, and it's kind of because she's really awkward to fit into a team, and her role is really weird. So Yukong's whole thing is that you have to speed tune her correctly to be around the same time as whichever character you need her to be speed tuned by, because she needs to be able to do a skill into her ult so that you can benefit from her kit most of the time, all the time. But that means you have to do weird stuff with how your characters are all speed built, and it's a lot of work. But the overall design of the character I really find enjoyable. But let's get into it. So a basic attack deals 50% of Yukong's attack as imaginary damage to a target enemy. Again, standard basic attack, nothing special. The skill obtains 2 stacks of roaring bowstrings to a maximum of 2 stacks. When roaring bowstrings is active, the attack of all allies increases by 40%, and every time an ally's turn, including Yukong's, ends, Yukong loses 1 stack of roaring bowstrings. When it's the turn where Yukong gains roaring bowstrings by using her skill, roaring bowstrings will not be removed. So essentially you get 2 turns for all of your allies to get 40% attack. Her talent, basic attack, additionally deals imaginary damage equal to 40% of Yukong's attack and increases the toughness reducing damage of this attack by 100%. This can be triggered again after 1 turn. It's whatever. Yukong is kind of built, she's built like a Harmony that's meant to deal damage. So you can kind of build her as a weird hybrid support DPS. But as a result, it means she kind of doesn't do either of them particularly well. And it's a big shame. Her technique. After using her technique, Yukong enters sprint mode for 20 seconds. In sprint mode, her movement speed increases by 35%, and Yukong gains 2 stacks of roaring bowstrings when she enters battle by attacking enemies. Her technique is whatever. It's really annoying because you have to enter battle using her technique. So you have to attack with her, and you can't use her technique and then switch out to another character, use their technique like Misha's time bomb, and then come back to her because the technique is now gone. Honestly, my favorite part about this technique is that it just increases her movement speed as you're going around the map. So if you're annoyed at how slow movement is, just shove Yukong on for a bit and walk around with her skill active, with her technique active. It's very nice. But other than that, not super useful. Now, this is the main part of her kit that is really weird, and when I first got it, seemed really good, and then in practice it turned to be less good. So, if Roaring Bowstrings is active, on Yukong when her ultimate is used, additionally increases all allies' crit rate by 21% and crit damage by 39%. At the same time, she will also deal imaginary damage equal to 228% of Yukong's attack to a single enemy. So the flat crit rate and crit damage buff seems really, really good, and to be honest, it is. Having someone that just flat increase crit rate and crit damage is fantastic. And then she also does a decent chunk of imaginary damage on top of it. The problem with this is that you ultimately only get it for 2 character actions at base Yukong. So for instance, if you have a team of Yukong, Blade, Jinglu, and I don't know, Laucha, shall we say. If after she's done this, Jinglu gets to have her turn. Jinglu's done hers bit. She's taking the buff. She really enjoyed it. And then it's now Laucha's turn. You now have your support or your sustain dealing increased crit rate and crit damage by 39%. Now, Laucha, that's not so bad because I think he actually scales off attack percent, so he does deal about damage anyway. But obviously, Blade does more damage than Laucha, and you're going to want Blade to be having the buff. But because someone has been faster than him, he's not going to get the option to do that. So it's kind of awkward to speed tune the entire team around it. And why do that when you can just do something like Bronya's ult and just not worry about it, or just do Ranmei's ult and just not worry about it? The complexity of needing to have your team do their actions in the correct order kind of screws Yukong over, which sucks because I do actually really like how Yukong plays. I just wish she was a bit better at it. Looking at her Eidolon 1 at the start of battle, increases the speed of all allies by 10% for 2 turns. It's a nice bonus to have. Having that extra 10% speed never hurts. It is only for 2 turns though. But E2, when any ally's current energy is equal to its energy limit, Yukong regenerates an additional 5 energy. This effect can only be triggered once for each ally. The trigger account is reset after Yukong uses her ultimate. So she can essentially gain 15 energy from her teammates. You can't gain any more until she uses her ultimate, which isn't great. It's a nice bonus to have. I don't think it's particularly good, but free extra 15 energy, fairly solid. When Roaring Bowstrings is active, Yukong deals 30% more damage to enemies. This is only really good if you've actually built your Yukong to deal any actual damage. When I was building her, I never felt like she did enough damage to warrant being built that way, which is a shame. But if you've somehow managed to build your Yukong to deal damage, I'm sure this is a very beneficial E4 to have. But for the most part, I don't see this being all that useful, because her damage is mainly just like a nice little bonus. When Yukong uses her ultimate, she immediately gains 1 stack of Roaring Bowstrings. What I think it means is if she uses her ult, Roaring Bowstrings becomes active, and then you always have a guaranteed ultimate Roaring Bowstring combo, which is, it's nice. It's nice to have, I guess. So it means that she can just do her ult whenever it's someone's turn and then give the team that entire bonus. Although it's only really going to be useful for that one person it's being used on next. So I can see the efficacy for it, but again, you have to get all the way up to E6 to be able to get a passive buff whenever you use her ultimate. It's not really enough. I like Yukong a lot. I really like Yukong, but her kit it does require a bit of work to really perfect. And that is that is Yukong, and those are all our options. I'll be honest, they're all pretty solid 4 stars. They're not the best, they're definitely not the best in the game, but they're really solid. Guinaifen, really solid fire dot. Sampo, really solid wind shear dot. Asta, really good support, she's still useful today. Yukong, little bit clunky, I find her fun, not everyone does. She does require a bit of work to get done. So in all honesty, your best bet is to pick between one of these 3. Who would I personally go for? It's gonna have to be Sampo. If I didn't have Guinaifen, it probably would have been Guinaifen just because I didn't have a copy before now. But I currently have 1 copy, and Sampo is taking all of my time and attention right now. But I want this man E6 as soon as possible because I just want him at his best. But yeah, depending on what you need, fire dot, wind shear dot, support. Thankfully, everyone has a copy of Asta, always a good option. Yukong, honestly, probably a last resort. She can definitely be used in some teams, but there just are better options out there that require less effort to put together, essentially. Obviously, there's no actual right answer. It all depends on your personal experience. Obviously, if you've got E6, Guinaifen, Yukong, Asta, you're going to want to go Sampo. If you've got E6, Guinaifen, Sampo, Asta, you're going to want to go Yukong because it would be a waste just to pull no one. So it all depends on who you've got going for you. Just out of interest, let's see where my characters are actually sat. So Yukong is E2. So we'd get her E3, which isn't something I want. Asta, we'd get her E4, which would be quite nice. And then Guinaifen is E0. So we'd get her E1, which is okay. But I know who I'm doing this for. I'm putting a load of time into Sampo right now, and I really want that E6. So we're going to be going for Sampo. Sampo with Black Swan right now is just so much fun to play that I can't not have a slightly improved version of this man. So that's who we're going for. And there we go. He is officially E5, and I am 1 away from this lovely E6 of Sampo. Right, there we are. Hopefully that helped at least one person try and make a decision on who they want to pick. Obviously, it was all down to your personal preference and how you intend on using the characters. You're going to be using them at the end of the day. Pick who you want or find the most fun. The meta in this game changes like every 2 weeks with a new character drop, so I wouldn't be too worried about which of the 4 stars are your best bet. They all are pretty solid in their own right. Even Yukong, she has her uses. A character always has its uses, it just may not be as useful as someone else. But anyway, with that, I must say my goodbyes. Thank you for those that stuck around to the end. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Be sure to let me know down in the comments below who you decided to pick. I'd be really interested to see who everyone went with. And if there are any other Yukong lovers out there, let me know, because she deserves some adoration. She's awkward, she's a bit clunky. I still think she's very fun, but she's still awkward and still clunky. But that kind of makes her weirdly enjoyable. Anyway, with that, I must say my goodbyes. Thank you, I've been James, the Mayor of JamessTown, and until next time, goodbye.